name is Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. I'm discovering a bit of a trend in Niagara region. Whenever I speak with Mayor Matt Siscoe from St. Catharines, an opposing viewpoint emerges shortly afterwards to provide a differing viewpoint of the subject at hand. While this may at first seem to be a statement on Mayor Siscoe's leadership, I don't believe it is. We live in a democracy, and all levels of government are subject to be criticized and questioned about the best path forward. What I find remarkable about St. Catharines and Niagara region is how polite and honest the conversations can be. People are wanting a genuine, honest conversation about the issues that are affecting their communities the most. As a result, I found that while disagreements are common, respect and an effort to communicate one's point of view is done as I believe it should be. Take, for example, today's interview. As we were editing our previous episode with Mayor Siscoe, the mayor had posted to his social media a short video explaining the city's bylaws regarding encampments, stating what the bylaw can and cannot do. In the comments for said video, a friend of the podcast, Sean Vanderklis, commented on how he believed First Nations communities were not being properly consulted in regards to housing and the impact that said bylaw might have on them. In addition, the broader impact that our housing bylaws and economy seem to have on unhoused, low-income individuals and families. One plan isn't going to fix this crisis. However, the crisis won't be fixed at all if we exclude those impacted the most by these laws from a seat at the table. I thought that this was a perspective that was not being discussed enough on the housing file in the 905, and that this indeed was worth a chat. We have had on Sean before to discuss 1492 Landback Lane in Caledonia a few years ago. Sean is a journalist and community organizer within the Niagara region. We always welcome his perspective and are glad to share it with you today.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Okay, well, thank you, Sean Vanderklis, for coming back to the 905er. It has been far too long. Welcome back. And yeah, it's good to see you again. We haven't talked in a while, so thank you very much for coming back on to talk, of all things, of course, housing in the 905 in St. Catharines in particular. Welcome back.
Thank you, my friend. It's great to be back. It's good to see your face again. It's been a while.
It has. So we're coming off, my last episode was again with Mayor Matt Siscoe of St. Catharines, and that episode we were talking about the Niagara housing plan to build supportive housing, subsidized, socialized housing for low-income individuals. We're going to have a link to that in the show notes, folks. If you don't have, pause this, go listen to that, come back and listen to this. And part of that was the encampment bylaw, that this to allow St. Catharines police officers to go into parks, areas surrounding schools, churches, public spaces, and remove encampments to move them to other parts of the city. On Mayor Siscoe's Facebook page, you had left a comment regarding the impact that this would have towards St. Catharines' indigenous community and the plate there. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that, because this is a topic that in the whole housing mess that we're finding ourselves in and the encampments, this is something that we aren't really talking about. And I think it's pertinent to just kind of shine a light on this. I'm wondering if you could just tell me your side or your concerns about the bylaw, encampment bylaw that the St. Catharines is enacting.
Yeah, most definitely. So in the Niagara region, specifically, the Niagara Regional Native Centre has done a fantastic job at reaching out to municipalities and forming MOUs. So we have an existing MOU with the City of St. Catharines. We're working on Niagara-on-Lake, Pelham, so on and so forth. So all the municipalities in the Niagara region, we're either completed that phase or in the process of being close to completing that phase. What's troubling for me specifically in regards to what's happening in the city of St. Catharines itself is that we have a formal MOU, and we've had one since 2019-18, where the city has committed to consulting with indigenous communities. And this area, like in the houseless population that exists, about I want to say 40% of them, the largest portion of the people who face houselessness are indigenous people. So our people are going to be impacted the most when it comes to any sort of bylaws that are being implemented, any sort of provincial legislation that's coming down. Um, and with that being said, it only makes sense that there'd be some sort of consultation that how that would have happened between the city of St. Catharines and the Niagara Regional Native Centre. I was the former president of the center. I have been in that acting capacity for the last 3 years, 4 years, all of Mayor Siscoe's tenure. Matt Siscoe is a personal friend of mine. He calls me after my host our radio shows. And he didn't call me for this. And it kind of caught me off guard. Like, why would you not call me on something that is so near and dear to our heart, something that affects Indigenous people at a rate significantly higher than non-Indigenous people? The first person who's publicly removed was an Indigenous person, right? And part of the concern is twofold: is these policies are not new. Like removing Indigenous people from their land and putting them out of sight is a pattern that has existed since the inception of Canada, since 1867. We saw it with residential schools. We saw it in the 1960s with the 60s scoop. We see it now with missing and murdered Indigenous people. And so this trend has just continued on. And for the mayor not to understand that is a bit troubling to me, because he calls himself an ally. He has my cell phone. He could have called me. So for him to even not acknowledge that is a bit of an issue. The other thing is that the Niagara is a relatively progressive city. They're on, I think it's fair to classify that they're on this journey of reconciliation. They're on this journey of trying to decolonize some of their practices. The best way to do so is to resort to the subject matter experts on this. Our views on land are not about ownership and property. It's about relationship, right? Like Indigenous people say, we're not environmentalists, because environmentalism, when you identify as a environmentalist, or when you identify yourself in any sort of fashion, you have that opportunity to opt out. We don't have that opportunity, right? So sorry.
Well, no, I want to just jump in, because you just mentioned, I want to branch off and talk about that a bit more in depth, and that is the relationship between Indigenous people and the land. And we keep hearing that, and I think it's for those of us who are not members of First Nation communities, it's a bizarre relationship that we don't quite get. I own my house, I own my land, I get to choose what goes on here, and I get to choose who can live here and who can't, and all that. I already know there are people listening to this saying, oh, but you don't have a right to that park. I have a right to that park. I have a right to, my kid gets to go play in that playground, and I have a right to go and walk through that park unmolested, and I don't have to encounter encampments and whatnot. What gives you the right? And that confrontation automatically gets people back up against the wall, and that's what I'm trying to get past on this. Is that let's have this conversation honestly. And I'm trying to get the perspective of Indigenous people to say, what does that mean to say, well, I'm going to build an encampment, I'm going to build a tent on a parkland or on a hydro right of way or whatever. What is that thinking mentality, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Yeah, so our views on land are relationship based, and it's an obligation based. If you listen to any sort of a land acknowledgement, some of the key words you'll hear are stewards of the land.
Right.
So we believe our job and our responsibility is to protect and maintain the land for the next 7 generations. So you think of, from an Indigenous worldview, you think of the last 7 generations that have come and the next 7 generations. Every decision I make now is not about me, it's about my kids. Mm-hmm. Right. So that kind of shares some of like the higher level philosophy thinkings of land themselves. But in acknowledging that, people are going to say that my kids have a right to this. And in reality, that's not true. There is no right to a park. There is and should be rights to housing. And if we acknowledge that rights to housing and houses exist, we can then acknowledge that the province, and this doesn't fall on any sort of mayors, but the province has not done their job and creating any sort of sustainable housing. There hasn't been any sort of funding increases in housing from the provincial government since Bob Rae. So we're looking like 30 years, right? So we need to keep that in mind. And the best measurement of a moral society is how they treat its lowest people. It really is. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in a place where inflation is through the roof, housing costs are through the roof, and these people have nowhere to go. There's a significant portion of St. Catharines houseless population that exists that are not there because of traditional means of being there, meaning that mental health isn't an issue, addictions aren't an issue. People are here because they've just been priced out of the market. There's a
Right.
family of four that exists that has a tent set up, has their couches, everything, but they can't afford the rent. And they're only there because they can't afford the rent. They're camping in an area or they're living in an area that isn't accessible to that. But other people don't have the luxury of tents. So why people camp in parks is because parks provide natural spaces to live under, right? There's pavilions, gazebos, or you can camp underneath the equipment. When it's all said and done, people are people and they're humans, and they should be treated with respect. Part of my issue with the bylaws themselves is that they're essentially doing this out of sight, out of mind. That
Mhm.
fine, be homeless. We're not going to address it, but just be homeless where we can't see it. Be homeless where it doesn't put a stain on our city's reputation, right? Which is problematic. Like acknowledge we need to have a fulsome conversation of where we're at and come up with solutions. And the criminalization of people going through houselessness is not the answer, in my opinion.
I I don't think, I hope everyone listening can agree on that, is that, and I think you bring up a good point of the unintended consequence of this bylaw is that you kick the problem down the road, so to speak, and that it's easy. You're right. It's easy to say, oh, the person in the camp by a school park or by public space, okay, we remove them and put them down the road where the bus doesn't quite go down that laneway or whatever have you.
Mm.
There was something. Maybe I'll play devil's advocate for a bit. There was
Yeah.
something that Mayor Siscoe was bringing up, and that was things like he described it as bridge housing, which was supportive housing. That's for people with mental health and addiction issues. But the idea of just building more affordable, subsidized housing, income adjusted housing, that he seemed to be very much in favor of. I'm gonna assume that you're on board with that.
No.
And so, from the other side of the aisle, how can he and the city government reach out to you guys to get on board and just get this rolling? Because I find that we all want the same thing, and this argument tends to be counterproductive. That, okay, if we need to get moving, how do we have this conversation that at the end of the day the housing gets built, people are safe, secure, and able to kind of get plugged back into the social pipeline, as it were? What do you want to see the city government or Niagara regional government come to you as a grassroots person
Yeah.
to say, let's all work together on this? What do you need to hear from them?
Well, I mean, he just needs to pick up the phone. I mean, the goal of the Niagara Regional Native Center is very unique in a sense that we have those memorandums of understanding. So while the friendship centers that exist across the country, and specifically in Niagara, we're the only organization that has put pen to paper that outlines that relationship. He's a personal friend of mine. If Matt Siscoe is listening, I want you to know, Matt, that I'm upset that you have not called me. You call me about everything else. You claim to be an ally, but you didn't call me when this was happening. You should have called me. Despite me not being the president, I could have put you in connection. We are already in the process of doing the work. Like, so, as an example, we're having the Niagara Regional Center's having a housing fair in the coming days, where we are picking people up who are struggling with obtaining affordable housing. We are putting people in connections with the right people to get subsidized housing, because there's numerous funding streams that exist for Indigenous people that they have the capacity to access. A lot of the issues that we run into is just the knowledge or the know-how of how to access these programs. So we're doing the work, and we have solutions to a lot of the problems that Mayor Siscoe is facing. The issue that we're running into is just the lack of consultation that exists. It's really that simple. If you had to
Mhm.
pick up the phone, if you had to reach out to either of the friendship centers that exist here in the Niagara region, Niagara Regional Native Center specifically, and a Fort Erie Native Friendship Center, a lot of this could have been not an issue. This would have been a dead issue. We would have been standing there in support with him. We historically hold a flag raising ceremony on the 21st of June every year because it's National Indigenous Peoples Day. I said that if I was president, we would boycott this. The center is now boycotting this, right? We would have stood proudly with you should consultation have happened, should you have listened to the subject matter expert, but you chose not to. This was an arbitrary decision that was made by the city of St. Catharines that goes against everything that they have been working towards with AMO, the Association of Municipalities, with all the experts, the subject matter experts that live in the Niagara region. There is no consultation done in any regard. And now we're stuck playing politics where I have to come on a podcast to rebuttal things that he has already said because of a bylaw that he made, elected to make. And to be clear, was supported by the majority of councillors. Shout out to Michaela Ratzlaff, city councillor, and Greg Miller, city councillors, who vehemently disagreed with these bylaws.
What are you afraid is going to happen down the road with this bylaw and what have you? Like the majority, I think the majority of people listening, if they listen to the previous episode, they're going to think it's going to be a kindly, let's move you away from the park, out from underneath the playground, the pavilion, and put you somewhere safer. I get the sense from you that you're worried that something unforeseen is happening. Or I'm wondering what are you worried is going to happen here?
Any interactions with police is a bad interaction when it comes to Indigenous people, right? When we talk about systemic racism, what we're really talking about is the application of the rule of law. So as an example, a white man or a non-racialized person driving down the highway at 60 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone, probably is going to go away with that. If pulled over. If he's pulled over, he's probably going to get away with it. There's a warning. If an Indigenous person or racialized person is doing the exact same thing, there's a higher chance that he's going to have an interaction and he is going to be criminalized, for lack of better terms, with that. Once we understand what we do know from a sociological point of view and a statistical point of view is that once that criminalization process happens, then it's just a downward spiral. You go from the criminalization to a failure to appear to a bench warrant issued, and then now you're stuck in these things. And then with the way our criminal justice system works is that the Crown will offer you a deal if you plead guilty, yada, yada, yada. So something as simple as I have nowhere to live now leaves you with a criminal record that should not exist. That's one of my concerns. The other concern is that the police do not have the capacity to do so. I'm staunchly against our carceral system, and by no means am I advocating for more funding. But they simply do not have the capacity to deal with these issues. A lot of the people who find themselves in these positions are people who, again, are dealing with addictions issues. Some of them are dealing with addictions issues. Some of them are dealing with mental health issues. They don't have the capacity to deal with it. Of all the people, I'd be curious to hear whose response is the police. Like, what capacity do you have to go in and remove these people? This is not going to be an easy call. In Niagara, one of the most frequent calls that police receive regarding mental health issues are people who hang out at our bus terminal. Right, they hang out, they loiter. Sometimes they become a little erratic and things get heated and passionate. And all they do is pick them up and remove them and put them down the road. Right, and that's relatively simple because that's all you have to take as the individual. But when it comes to a family living there, when it comes to people's possessions, that 10, 15-minute call has now turned into an hour, 2-hour call, right? Mm-hmm. So what is going to happen in that regard? And where are you going to put them? The Association of Municipalities, part of the AMO, one of the conferences that they just had, part of their recommendations was that if there's no suitable housing in place, they should not be removed from their encampment. This is from the province of Ontario. All the municipalities of Ontario have got to come together and made these recommendations, and they're just going against those recommendations. People do not. We don't have the space. We don't have the housing space for our houseless population, and we're just working counter to that.
I absolutely agree with you on that. I guess the question is, in an ideal world, there would be some kind of supportive subsidized housing that you tell these people, okay, we're going to take, because we can all agree living in a park is not ideal for anybody. Right. Not, no matter your background, no matter where you're from, where you're going, that's not where you want to be. So the question then is, okay, so we take the person and say, where we put you, the ideal choice would be, let's put you into some kind of supportive housing, get you cleaned up, plugged in,
Yeah.
and take the steps to rebuild your life. The problem that I mean, we've been talking about this on the podcast for 5 years. There's a million-kilometer gap between where we are now and where we need to be to get that happen. Like, we are just not building the housing. So I'm maybe this is an unfair question to ask you.
Yeah.
But how do we bridge that gap in the meantime? Because the worry is that if we just don't treat the people, I don't want to say treat, that's the wrong word.
Yeah.
But if we don't want to approach the people who are in parks and address them in a humanely, fairly, and proper way, my worry is that just gets pushed down the road again. At the same time, you're right, it is easy just to yank them out of a park, put you down the end of the cul-de-sac and lock the gate and say, yeah, not my problem anymore. Like, what should we be doing here? That's a long way of me saying that.
Yeah. So I'll answer in pipe dream. First, build housing.
Well, no, let's go with pipe dream, because I think that's the goal that we want. And I'm tired of the conversations of like, well, that's just stupid, Sean. That's never going to happen. Well, we got to start somewhere. And let's start with the goal and build back from there. So I'm going to ask you, what's your pipe dream? What do you want to see happen here?
A national crown corporation that builds houses. When was the last time an apartment building was built? It's really that simple. We see condos being built. The reason apartment buildings aren't being built is because they're not lucrative to developers. We should have a national crown corporation that focuses solely on housing, and that does two things. It creates housing at a low income, at a cost that is relative to where society's at, but it also manages the housing market. Right? It's really that simple. And we get to make money off of it. So now, if it's a crown corporation, we would then get to make money off of it. The interim solution is instead of looking for housing specifically, so housing that has been geared towards rent, we should be providing subsidies to individuals who could then take to market rent places. So instead of moving to a house that is like in Niagara, we have a lot of co-ops that exist. So these co-ops are market rates. These buildings are designated those marketplaces. What I'm suggesting is we offer subsidies to individuals who then have the capacity to go to any place, and they would receive that subsidy in addition. So if a one-bedroom place, I think, is around, I think it's like $1,300 here in Niagara, we're looking at in the Niagara region. It's about $1,300 for one bedroom. What I'm saying is the region would give hypothetically $750. If you're identified as a low income person, you get $750 on top of Ontario Works or ODSP or whatever support systems that you're currently getting, and that gets to go towards your rent. Because then they're faced with the same problems, but now the market has opened up exponentially. Right? Instead of looking for designated spaces, we have the opportunity to create our own spaces. And to me, that's a very, very easy solution to do. And again, it makes the market as open as possible. We're not limited to specific parts of the neighborhoods. We're not limited to specific parts of the city. Yeah. Those are my solutions. There's nothing solved by Sean.
It's a compelling argument, and I mean that right now, I want to say the majority of municipalities in the province have some kind of, well, it's not a crown one, but it is owned by like a regional or a municipal housing corporation, which, I mean, that I find those are underfunded because they should be the largest landlord in a given municipality, which my thinking is, if they're the largest landlord providing market-based rent as well as income-adjusted rent, that would bring private rentals prices down because, that's supply and demand economics. You bring that down, and that's rather than like strict rent controls, which we've told is apparently what doesn't work. To me, that would make more sense. Is okay, that brings down the cost of rent, but still you're able to make a buck. If you're a private landlord, you're still able to make a buck. It's over a longer timeline than say, I want a 10-year turnaround. Maybe it's 20, but it's still that you're making a buck. So, let's put in perspective here. Where have you seen anywhere in Ontario that does this right, or seems to have the framework to do it right? Because I was thinking of St. Catharines and Niagara, and before that, I had on Mayor Carolyn Parrish from Mississauga.
Okay.
And you're taking two completely, like, she's very much a market-driven approach. it seems to be working, but time will tell. We'll see how that. There's always kinks in the plan. We'll see how that
Mhm.
goes. Hamilton is spinning the wheels. They're just kicking the tire, and I don't see them actually doing any plan to build anything. And this just seems to be a Swiss cheese approach. Like, as municipalities are told, figure it out, and nobody seems to be able to do it, or we just have this kind of Swiss cheese. Now, part of me wonders if it's because Niagara's priorities are going to be different than Mississauga's. Mississauga doesn't really have space to build, so I'm going to give that as a window. But I'm wondering, like, is there anywhere in this province that seems to kind of have the right layout? And maybe we have to zoom out and say, is there anywhere in Canada that is
Yeah.
approaching this the right way to get housing built for those on the lowest rung of society?
So I don't like based off of my observations, I'm not seeing an ideal situation. I mean, we find ourselves in this situation because this has been downgraded on the municipalities. Like where Matt Siscoe gets a pass is he is being asked to overcome a challenge that should be rightfully held by the province and rightfully supported by the federal government. And our municipalities in general do not have the capacity to do this. They don't have the funds. Their budgets don't support this. It is absolutely insanity that they are stuck doing that. So that's where he gets a pass. I know that his job is tough. I know that he's being tasked with a problem that has yet to be solved in Canada. But that doesn't mean that we still need to go down the same path of criminalization and so on and so forth. Long way of saying is off the top of my head, I haven't seen any municipalities or cities in Ontario or Niagara or Canada that have done exceptionally well on this. Everybody's taking I guess a cookie cutter approach to it. Like when you guys were, I believe in Hamilton, I saw a little while ago that they were proposing doing builds in Hamilton, but NIMBYism is what stopped that from happening. Not my backyard.
Yeah, that seems to be the trend across the province. I'll be honest, is that somebody
Yeah,
says, "Hey, I'm going to build a 20-story condo or apartment rental or whatnot," and it's like, "Oh, it'll ruin the character of the neighborhood." It's like,
yeah,
really? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean I wish I could say that's a Hamilton problem, but it's really not.
yeah,
A
yeah,
905
yeah.
problem of just, oh, I we need to build we're going to build this, a 20-story rental unit, right?
Mm,
Oh, who's going to get there? Well, some of it might be, supportive housing, or it might be income adjusted housing, or whatever
yeah,
have you. Oh, I don't want those people next to me. Well,
yeah,
they got to go
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah,
And we're it's the kind of phrases, we're all in this together.
yeah.
Our cities aren't our cities are neighborhoods, but our neighborhoods are all touching and connected to each other, and that's what makes a city a city.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that we haven't even addressed is the root cause of the houselessness is not a lack of housing. It is a lack of community support. So like it's a lack of individuals feeling connected to a community. And because
Mhm.
people don't feel connected, that's where substance abuse issues happen. That's where addictions happen. That's where your mental health, if it exists, deteriorates because there's no sense of community that exists. So, like another way of approaching this houseless situation is providing safe supply for people who are using, providing the supports necessary for people to overcome the life that unfortunately has led them to the streets. Right? We need to find a ways to deal with the people who have fallen through the cracks of society,
Mhm.
and a lot of times by no fault of their own. Right? Like when we talk about the intergenerational effects of residential schools, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about addiction. We're talking about mental health. And until we start addressing that as an issue, I don't know that we'll ever solve the houselessness crisis.
Well, it you're putting a lot of big thoughts in my head here, Sean. So kudos to you. But the treatment, like the historical treatment of Canada towards our First Nations partners, because that's what the treaties were originally supposed to
Yeah,
be. It's a partnership to
correct.
build something new. And I keep thinking of there was an image that you had is just the police officer coming to pick a First Nations man, woman, or child up off the street and put them in a paddy wagon to drive them to another part of the city. It's like that's what Canada does. It has always done that in one way or another. You either
Mm,
went out to the prairies and you told First
Yeah.
Nations, hey, get off this, go to this land over here. That's where we're going to put you.
Mhm.
And historically, it has always been, we're dealing with the problems now. Like,
Yeah. That's
it didn't work out the way that we intended. And I
yeah.
think that's what we need. That's what, for I'm going to approach this from my perspective. That's what reconciliation is. Acknowledgement that this plan didn't work out. If I can be blunt, the plan either to remove the Indian from the land so the white man can move in didn't work because you're still here.
Yeah.
Did the residential school of let's remove the Indian from the child didn't work. But all these problems produced all these plans produced massive problems that I think we all have to figure out how to fix. We have to. This is what reconciliation is, and that the doubling down on what happened in the past. Because we say, "Hey, get off that land." It doesn't work, but we can find a new
Yeah.
solution that is harmonious and part of reconciliation. And we're gonna trip over our feet, but at least we'll trip over it together. We'll pick ourselves up and figure out the next step.
The biggest issue is that politics and the voters are very short-sighted. We think in 4-year terms at most. But
Right.
what we're talking about is like a long-term investments, right? When we talk about an increase in funding to mental health and addiction supports, these aren't the type of investments that are going to yield profits tomorrow. These are the type of suggestions that are going to yield profits 10 years from now, right? 20
Mm-hmm.
years from
Mm-hmm.
now. And unfortunately, the voter's mind, that voters don't have the capacity to think that long term. Unfortunately, right? Like if you look at the last provincial election, uh, the voters didn't even care about platforms. The conservative government, the liberal government, and the NDPs, our parties, not governments, my apologies, didn't release a platform until weeks before the campaign. Like, how do I know where you stand on an issue if you're not putting pen to paper? And
Mm-hmm.
we find ourselves in these situations nowadays, voting to talking points and voting to populist ideas that don't actually do anything but appease us for the next 4 years. It's a very short-sighted way of thinking. And when I talk about indigenous worldviews on our relationships to land, like we have to understand the decisions we make aren't going to affect us tomorrow. It's for my children's children. We have to think of the next 7 generations. I don't own this land. I'm merely responsible for taking care of it for the next generations to come. And the reason Western ideologies don't align with that is because it's about property ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
When colonization started happening, everybody has heard of the term the Wild West. The reason the Wild West exists is because colonization started on the east. So when Christopher Columbus and everybody came, they started on the East Coast, and then everything like east, like 100 miles from the shore, was considered indigenous land, First Nations land. That's where the
Mm-hmm.
term the Wild West comes from, because nobody lived there. It was a lawless society because apparently First Nations people didn't hold the capacity of having laws. I don't know where I was going with this. But
No, but I mean, I think that we always return to this conversation, and it's ties not to talk with you, but just the topic itself is that I think it's necessary to have though, because in Canada we've been having this conversation for 150, 160, 200
yeah,
years. And we're going to keep having it just to start changing our mindset. And I kind of look at, well, we're recording this on June 19th in the morning. And the day before, Premier Doug Ford was speaking about the Ring of Fire in the North and
yeah,
how he's going to give all the indigenous people, treat them like gold, when I don't think he's ever actually met with them to discuss the Ring of Fire. But I mean, it's that attitude that I even see from progressive people online saying, well, but like he's not completely wrong. It's just, it's not about, that's the problem that got us in this matter to begin with. Like, is that we say, you just need to know what we're talking about. We know what's best for you. We know
yeah.
what's best. And it's rather than say, well, what do you want? What do I want? Like, let's find a middle ground and move forward. Like, that's kind of how nations to nations talk. I want this, you want that. Where's the middle ground? Let's go with that, and let's build something different, mutually
Yeah.
beneficial for the future. I'm not going to ask you to comment on Bill 5 or up north, but it's just that attitude I'm kind of talking about, is that it seems, it's when the premier talks like that, it kind of gives license to lesser levels of government to kind of say, well, you need to learn your space, you need to learn your lesson, and
Yeah.
I find it's very dangerous to and
It
entertain.
it diminishes our relationship. So, like, I have two parts to answer this question. So, if you look historically in the documents that existed from Canada leading up to Confederation in 1867, Indigenous people were always referred to by the British government as our brothers and sisters. The
Hmm.
Indigenous people are brothers and sisters. Once Confederation happened in 1867, they go from our brothers and sisters to our children. So
Hmm.
that shows the perception of the relationship that existed, that we were equals at one point, and it turned into ownership, that we know what's best for you, our children. Once you become a fully grown nation, we can then allow you to be. And unfortunately, that's not the case at all, because we are our own individual nations. We are sovereign in and of itself. And to take, so the second part to that um is to, from a conservative point of view, this is contractual law, what
Hmm.
exists right now. And conservatives love putting pen to paper, love writing things out, and love to honor that. If this were to happen at a Fortune 500 company with another Fortune 500 company, finding themselves in these types of disputes that exist, the courts would have a heyday with it. And I think we're seeing that now, actually. In relation to Indigenous peoples, the courts are now siding with Indigenous people. No, you cannot do this. Um, this bill, I know we're not talking about Bill 5. Bill 5, 100% is not going to stand the test of the Supreme Court because of that, right? I think part of Trump's, just part of Trump, part of
You said
Doug,
it, not me.
I think part of Doug Ford's desire to push this through. So right now, constitutionally, provinces, governments, organizations have what's called the duty to consult when wanting to do
Hmm.
resource extraction on lands. With UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, that standard has dramatically increased. So instead of the duty to consult, now they have the obligation of getting free, prior, and informed consent. And consent being the key word there. We have to provide consent for
Hmm.
any sort of resource extraction, any sort of land development on our own lands. There is no national strategy. This is the disconnect that exists nationwide right now. Is that national strategy is yet to be defined. So Doug Ford's desire to push us through at a fast pace is anticipation of knowing that this is going to come. And consultation merely means I consulted. What does that look like, right? Like, Western society is so good at giving us umbrella type terms that then meet the definition of consultation, right? We talk to an Indigenous person about the land in the Ring of Fire. The question is, who is that Indigenous person? Do they have the authority or capacity to provide said consultation or participate in said consultation? And was it meaningful enough, right? Was it meaningful?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's meaningful when there's like an enthusiastic yes to move forward on it. Then okay, well, we have buy-in and we're all moving forward.
Yeah.
I do. I could talk about Bill 5 and the Ring of Fire. All that'd be a whole other episode. So I'm gonna, unfortunately, I have to bite my tongue on that because I think I'm
Yeah.
taking up too much of your time. But I think that what you bring up is a valid point of just coming back to the housing matter here, not just in St. Catharines, but the sizable First Nations communities in Hamilton as well as Mississauga and Peel
Yeah.
region. That I don't. I think that what we should probably be taking away from this conversation is that it's not an onerous task. It's a party to invite to the table to guarantee success, long-term success. And because I don't see this like this doesn't. It's not just about Indigenous people. We have to take care. This is our home. These are our communities. These are our cities. These are where we live. We thrive. When one of us doesn't thrive, we all hurt. We have to put money into healthcare, into treatment, into police services, all those things that money could be put towards building community centers, building schools, building parks, the things that make our cities worth living in. That's where I want our tax dollars to go to, and that we're all able, these common areas that we're all able to participate in festivals and things that bring a city together. That's where we should be spending money on, rather than trying to figure, well, how do we deal with this group over here or that group over here? It should be about how do we bring this group in
Yeah.
and make them part of the whole, so to speak. So that's
Yeah.
my editorial rant for the latter half of this episode.
One more point is that to financially support these bylaw changes, we're taking $750 out of reserved funding from our budget to support these. Money that's supposed to go to initiatives that are in dire need because of extreme circumstances are not going to receive that support now, because the $750,000 is being put into new bylaw officers and new support systems for this. In reality, I'm very well aware that this solution will not be solved overnight. And I am not saying that I have the answer to this. What I'm saying is that consultation should have happened. If you bring us along with the problems that you're facing, we could have potentially solved this together. And instead, now you're alienating one of your largest demographics in the city of St. Catharines. Well, you could have brought us along with you, right? And that's the issue that we have in Niagara, is that we weren't consulted. We signed a memorandum of understanding. You're not honoring that memorandum of understanding, and now you're making arbitrary decisions that are going to negatively affect Indigenous people at a higher rate than they would any other person who is finding themselves in these vulnerable situations. Call me. It's really that simple.
Well, that was going to be my last question. Is it too late for the city council and for Mayor Matt Siscoe to pick up the phone and start having that conversation now?
Never. No, we are not a prideful people. The goal is tomorrow. The goal is always, what can we do to make tomorrow's society better than it is today? And the best way to do so is consultation. The best way to do so is working together. The best way to do so is diversity of opinions. Instead of having businesses, instead of answering the phone calls to businesses and corporations, you should be having people who are affected and living these unfortunate circumstances be guiding your principles.
Well, I'll leave it at that for this episode. Thank you very much, Sean, for coming on once again. All the best to you, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Ashley and Jess with Wellness Reality Check. We are two health practitioners, moms, and best friends trying to navigate the world of holistic health in a balanced, productive way that brings health to our lives instead of dogmatic extremes. We'll be breaking down health trends, interviewing your favorite health influencers, and always keeping it real. We hope this podcast brings listeners back down to earth, providing a dose of reality in the often idealized world of health and wellness.
Wellness Reality Check. Follow the show now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at wellnessrealitycheck.com. Hi, it's Matt. I'm one of the producers here on Writing Class Radio. Andrea and Allison have the summer off, but they have left behind a collection of stories with a sticky note on them called Summer Echoes. Stories worth hearing again. These are the episodes that stuck with us, made us laugh, cry, or look at the world a little differently. Whether you're hearing them for the first time or coming back for another listen, these stories still have something to say. So hit play, lean in, and let the stories move you all over again. Summer Echoes on Writing Class Radio, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at writingclassradio.com.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.